In this series of videos, I am going to be taking you through the pre-release for October-November 2020. Now this is an interesting pre-release because it's the first examination after the COVID lockdown in 2020. The exam in the summer was never happened. So basically what's happening is they have done a pre-release for the next sitting of the exam, which is very, very similar to the exam pre-release that never happened, i.e. the cancelled exams. So if you were booked in for that exam, you might have remembered it. If not, don't worry. We'll take this from the beginning anyway. So here is the pre-release anyway for winter, the winter sitting 2020 in the UK, and it will also be used as some of the rest of the world as well. But let's have a look at it. It's just like any other pre-release. We know these already, that they have a set format. There's three tasks, and the first task is usually sort of setting up data and entering some simple data. The second task is adding a little bit more complexity, and then the third task is usually a bit of maths. And this one is no different to the others. So first of all, let's have a look, and we're just going to read through it. Interestingly, normally what I do when I get these pre-releases, the way that I work is that I will code these before I do a demo or help my students. Now, I'm actually going to be recording this as I do it for the first time. So I might make some mistakes because sometimes I do, and then I'll go back and change them. But I wanted to do this, and I do these videos quite often right from the start because it helps you see my thought processes as I'm going through this, and hopefully that will help you as well if you're interested in sort of how to approach a big problem like this. But let's read it. So we've got an online computer shop sells customised personal computers. Every computer sold includes a basic set of components costing $200, and additional items can be added from the table. And there was actually a pre-release a couple of years ago that was kind of similar to this. It was slightly different, but they've kind of rehashed this a bit. So we're going to let someone buy a computer, customised computer, which is a very common thing you can do these days. Every computer sold includes a basic set of components of $200, so that's going to be our base cost. And additional items are added. So we can add a case, RAM, a hard disk, solid state drive, second hard disk drive if we want, optical drive and operating system. And this should help you as well with some of your theory for the exam. Then it says, as well as the basic set of components, every computer must include one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk drive from the table. A computer is supplied with or without an operating system. Write and test a program or programs for an online computer shop. Your program or programs must include appropriate prompts for the entry of data. Data must be validated on entry. Error messages and other output need to be set out clearly and understandably. All arrays, variables, constants, and other identifiers must have meaningful names. You will need to complete these three tasks. So this sort of section here, it's standard on every single pre-release. We've got to make sure we've got error messages handled and we're entering data. So the first task is setting up the system. We're going to use arrays to store the item code, description, and price of all these things. And this is exactly the same, basically, as the previous pre-release of the exam that got cancelled because of COVID-19. So that's what we're going to need to set up some arrays. Then we're going to let the customer choose one case, one RAM, and one main hard disk drive. So that's one of those three. And again, this is almost exactly the same as the last one. Calculate the price of the computer using the cost of chosen items and the basic set of components. Store and output the chosen items and the price of the computer. So when they're talking about that basic set of components, really what they're talking about, if you think about a computer, it will be the power supply. It will be the motherboard, because the motherboard isn't on there. It will be maybe a sound card on the motherboard, etc. But realistically, it's the motherboard and the power supply, and maybe a fan as well on for the processor. Actually, is processors in there? No, so there's no processors in those. So actually, the basic thing will be the processor. So it's a bit weird, actually. not letting a user pick their processor, their CPU, is a bit weird, because actually that's something that most people would normally want to pick. But anyway, they obviously thought that it was a bit too complicated. So that's what the $200 is going to cover: the power supply, motherboard, and the CPU. So task 2, once we've done that, we've calculated the cost of that, what they've picked, we're going to store it and then output it to the screen to say to the customer, is this what you want? And then for task 2, we're going to let them pick additional items, allow a customer to choose whether to purchase any items from other categories, and if so, which items. So this is optional. Update the price of the computer and store and output the additional items. So actually this is kind of like task 1 and task 2 from the previous pre-release. I know I keep mentioning the previous pre-release because it is very similar. So we're going to let them pick, do they want to have a solid state drive, second hard disk drive, optical drive, and do they want an operating system? And you'd think, do people always want an operating system? Yes. Well, not necessarily. They might, because you can download things like Linux, for example. There's lots of other free operating systems, and Linux is a really good free operating system. You might not want Windows, etc. And then finally, we're going to offer a discount, apply a 5% discount to the price of the computer if the customer has bought only one additional item, and then a 10% discount if they have bought 2 or more. So I'm already thinking for task 3, actually, we'll have some kind of variable to store a count for that, whether or not, how many additional items they've bought, and then we'll output the amount of money saved and the new price for the computer after the discount. So actually, this is a really nice, simple task. Everything we do is just going to be via sort of command prompt. We're not going to do any visual Windows programming because that will just get in the way of the core of this. Okay, so let's start coding.